friend who was murdered 5 years ago just Snapchatted me. Part 1. On Valentine's Day 5 years ago, I got that terrible phone call that Lydia had been murdered. Naveed showed up at her apartment early in the evening with flowers and a stuffed teddy bear. Sunflowers. They were Lydia's favorite. He was waiting for her where she normally parked. She got home and a pretty heated discussion happened between the two of them. From what I heard from one of her neighbors at the funeral, she was trying to get him to understand that the two of them were never going to happen and he was belligerently refusing to accept that fact. He pulled out a gun and shot her. She died almost instantly. The next few months were a blur. All of our friends were so devastated that something like that could happen to us. It seemed to come from nowhere. Between the funeral, investigations, trial, and all the emotional heaviness that each of those carry, it was no surprise that our fun little group slowly started to disband. Naveed is in jail serving a life sentence for first-degree murder. The girls that Lydia was closest to started a little memorial page on Facebook that still sees activity even after all this time. I'll still talk to a few of them every now and then, but I've mostly started hanging out with a different group of people. Lydia still crosses my mind from time to time. I remember visiting her at the fast food place she worked at and her always hooking it up with a little bit extra food in my bag. We would always make plans to take our dogs on a date together, but it never really happened. Last night I was hanging out with some friends, just relaxing playing some cards. I got a notification on my phone from Snapchat. Lydia P has joined Snapchat. My stomach dropped. I stared at my screen for what felt like an eternity. My screen dimmed and I looked up and one of my buddies asked if everything was okay. I guess I had turned a little pale as every drop of blood fled from my face and seemed to pool together in my chest. Time seemed at a standstill as I tried to figure out what was happening. Oh yeah, I finally responded. I'm fine. Just the coffee. You know how it messes me up sometimes. I got up and went to the bathroom to relieve myself and splash a little water on my face. The initial shock of seeing her name on my phone wore off and I started to think logically. I still have Lydia's number in my phone after all these years. I've probably switched phones a dozen times since her murder, but her number is still in there. Sure, my phone will delete my mom's number when I get a new phone, but Lydia stays. Technology is confusing sometimes. The only logical answer is that the phone company reassigned her number and this person has joined Snapchat for the first time. I washed my hands and with it the initial terror I felt went down the drain. My buddies thought the story was creepy as hell when I told them, but there was still this nagging in the back of my mind and pit of my stomach. Must be the coffee, I told myself on the drive home. As is the norm before falling asleep, I found myself switching from all my social media in bed. Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, maybe a little Tumblr, and if I'm really bored I guess I'll check Snapchat. I have Android and Snapchat is pure garbage on Android, so I rarely get on there. I had forgotten about the Lydia situation until the second that I tapped that little icon. The app opened up to a dark screen as the camera tried to pick up my feet in my pitch black bedroom. My dog was curled up at my feet knocked out from playing with her Wooby earlier. There was a notification in Snapchat that let me know I had a new follower. I knew it was whoever had Lydia's old number, but found it weird that they would follow me. Sure, I have her number still in my phone, but how would this new person know who I am or to follow me? I opened the notification and looked at her name next to that solid red ghost. My mind flashed back to sitting in the drive-thru and joking about how she was going to get herself in trouble for those extra 2 tacos. She really was a great girl. Beautiful brown eyes and a smile that seemed to make the world just a little bit brighter. I really did miss her. I tapped on the notification mainly out of a compulsion I have to not have unread notifications in my apps. My dog exhaled in exasperation and jumped off the bed. I heard her scurry to her cage a little bit faster than she normally does when she's ready to sleep in there. She started panting pretty heavily. I turned to my left to look in the direction of her cage. She made this weird whiny/growl noise that I've never really heard her make before and continued to pant as though she had just come in from outside. My phone screen dimmed and I jumped a little at the sudden darkness. I ran my finger over the scanner to unlock and turn on the screen and got more blackness. Stupid app always reopens in the camera instead of where I left off. I was expecting to have a little light in the room but just had the blackness of my camera trying to pick up my feet again. No wait, the bottom left of the camera viewfinder had a weird haze to it. I moved my phone to the left with trepidation to see what sort of madness my phone seemed to detect. My thumb tapped the screen to make sure it didn't go dim again and a small circle popped up to try and focus on whatever this strange haze was in my room. I couldn't help but shiver as my dog's panting got a little more intense and I heard her shuffle around in her cage. That's enough of this, I thought, and went to my friend list to see what was going on with this person who had Lydia's old phone number. Whoever they were, they had already posted a story or two. The small circle next to the name Lydia was black, and I could see some text there. Without knowing why, I tapped it. The first story was a video of what looked like a parking lot. It was hard to tell because the phone was moving so much, but I could see the yellow lines of a parking spot. The camera started to slow down a little bit and I could see what looked like dark red marks on the floor. My blood froze in my veins as I realized I was looking at the bloodstained parking lot of Lydia's apartment complex. There was a second of pause as the story reached its time limit and moved on to the next portion, still recording the yellow lines and red stains. My dog is frantic at this point. She ran from her cage and started scratching at the door, no longer wanting to be in there. There was no way I was getting up to let her out. I'm not even sure I could do nothing but grasp my phone with both hands. She jumped on the bed and whimpered at me and then ran back in her cage to cower. The next story started. It was a bright white screen that hurt my eyes after being in the dark for so long. The camera moved back a little and I saw the white fur of a teddy bear holding a giant red heart that said life without you is unbearable. It was only on screen long enough to barely make out what it said, but I recognized it right away from the trial. It was the bear Naveed gave Lydia on the night he killed her. My screen went black again as the next story started, but only for a second or two. It lit up again, but this time yellow and black as my eyes stared at a large sunflower. I felt a tear escape my eye and seemed to exhale for the first time for what felt like hours. I had been holding my breath. I was suddenly aware of how cold the room was. My eyes moved frantically fast in their sockets as I looked at every detail of the sunflower. The story had been going for a while now, as it was just a video of the same sunflower filmed over what was probably 2 minutes. I was captivated and couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Even blinking felt like a betrayal. Finally, the story ended and my screen went black. I heard myself whimper in relief. The next screen was what I saw in the thumbnail before I tapped on it. It was a solid black screen with white text that was comprised of only 3 words. He got out. I threw my phone out of my hands and ran out of my room. I could feel the hot bile in the back of my throat and tried to make it to the bathroom before it erupted out of my mouth. I didn't make it to the toilet and instead retched in my bathroom sink. Red vomit stained my sink and I jumped as I heard my dog begin to furiously bark. I crouched over my sink and tried to stop throwing up. When I glanced my reflection, dimly lit from the small nightlight I keep in my bathroom, I could tell my eyes were bloodshot from the effort of pushing out the bile. I felt a wave of coldness waft through the bathroom and the vomit suddenly stopped. A couple of coughs and some mouthwash and I realized the coldness of the room was gone. My dog was still barking. I called for her to be quiet and she whimpered and I heard her cage rattle as she found her way back inside of it. It took me a while to work up the courage to go back to my room, but my logical mind prevailed and I came to the conclusion that someone must be pranking me. When I got back to my room, my phone was face up on the floor, still lit. The same story was on there. A black screen with 3 little words. As I stared down at it, the story changed to a black screen with 2 more words. Warn the love of my life comment for part 2.